7 years of silence, and they still couldn't say sorry without attaching an invoice. That's the thing nobody tells you about toxic families. They don't change. They just repackage it. Same product, new box. My family had spent the better part of my adult life treating me like a walking atom with feelings they didn't particularly care about. And on a Tuesday evening in October, sitting in the most expensive restaurant in the city, staring at a bill that could have funded a small country's infrastructure, I finally understood something that should have been obvious years ago. Some people only call you back when they need something from you. My name is Andrew Jenkins, and this is the story of the best dinner I got asked to. Welcome to Real's Dad Truth. Before we continue with today's story, please take a moment to support us by giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us and gives us the motivation to bring you more powerful and emotional stories every single day. We would also love to hear your thoughts. Please share your feelings, opinions, or reactions in the comments below, and don't forget to include the hashtag #RealsDadTruth. Thank you so much for being here, for listening, and for becoming a part of our story-loving community. Let me paint you a picture of my family because context matters here. There's Sandra, my mother, a woman who could find a way to make any situation about money and still somehow convince you she was doing you a favor. Sandra had a gift, truly. She could ask you for your last $20, make you feel guilty for hesitating, and then tell the whole family you were selfish. Olympic-level manipulation. I say that with all the love a son can muster after 7 years of therapy. Then there's Larry, my father, a quiet man who'd long since outsourced all moral decision-making to Sandra. Larry wasn't a bad person. He was just absent, physically present, spiritually checked out. He'd nod at whatever Sandra said, and then go find something on television to be deeply interested in, a real supportive presence. My sister Ashley, 3 years younger, approximately 40 years more entitled. Ashley had a PhD in expecting things from me. Her tuition, which I'd already helped with twice, her car insurance, which somehow became my problem. And then the crown jewel, her wedding, $28,000, not a contribution, not a loan, a demand delivered like a summons. My brothers Kevin and Jeff, youngest two, good kids, honestly, but they'd been raised in the same ecosystem. Kevin was 24, Jeff was 22. They didn't know any better. I couldn't fully blame them. I could partially blame them, but you know what? That's for another paragraph. And then there was me, Andrew, the oldest, the one who done the math early and realized that being the responsible sibling in my family was a career with no salary, no vacation days, and terrible health insurance. The financial demands hadn't happened all at once. That would have been too obvious. No, it was the slow boil. A few hundred here, a few thousand there. Ashley's tuition. First semester, fine. Second semester. Okay, I'm stretched. Third semester. Wait, why am I paying for all 4 years? The car insurance? Sure. Temporary situation. 2 years later, why is this still on my bank statement? The wedding. $28,000. That's when I sat down with a calculator and my rapidly decreasing self-respect and said no. That was the word that broke everything. No. Sandra called me within the hour. Andrew, you need to understand what this means to your sister. I understand what it means to my bank account. Mom, this is family. You don't say no to family. I also don't take out loans for someone else's wedding. You're being selfish. I'm being broke. You have a good job. I have a good job in rent and student loans and a life that also requires funding. Yes, she went quiet. That kind of quiet that Sandra deployed when words weren't working and she needed to recalibrate. Then she said very softly, very deliberately, I'm very disappointed in you, Andrew. And I said something that surprised even me. I know. I'm sorry about that. I hung up and then nothing. The calls thinned out. The text became shorter. Then they stopped altogether. Ashley didn't speak to me for a month, then 2, then it just became the arrangement. Kevin and Jeff, bless them, followed the family temperature. Larry sent me a happy birthday text 8 months later that I'm fairly certain Sandra typed and sent from his phone while he was watching football. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I was free. I told myself a lot of things in those first few months, standing in my apartment cooking dinner for one, scrolling through my phone and noticing how few names lit up my screen anymore. I didn't know it yet, but the silence was just Act 1. 18 months after Ashley's wedding happened without me. Apparently, Scott, her now husband, had a rich uncle who stepped in, which great, glad someone did. I found a lump left side of my neck. Small, firm, the kind of thing you'd convince yourself was nothing for approximately 3 weeks before a doctor's appointment changes the entire trajectory of your life in about 11 minutes. The oncologist was a calm woman named Dr. Riaz. She had the manner of someone who delivered difficult news regularly and had developed a kind of steady compassion that somehow made it worse and better simultaneously. "It's a malignant tumor," she said, "but we caught it early. You're fortunate." Fortunate, I repeated, the way you repeat words when your brain is still catching up to your ears. "The prognosis is genuinely good, Andrew. We'll move quickly. Surgery first, then we assess." I drove home and sat in my car for 45 minutes in the parking garage. I want to tell you I was brave about it. I want to tell you I was stoic, that I squared my jaw and marched forward with grim determination. But what I actually did was call my mother. She didn't pick up. I left a voicemail, not a dramatic one. I wasn't going to perform my cancer diagnosis into a machine. I just said I'd gotten some medical news and I'd love to talk when she had a chance. She didn't call back. I texted Larry. He read it. The blue check marks of a man who saw the message and chose the television instead. I called Ashley. Voicemail. Kevin. Voicemail. Jeff, who was the most likely to respond, actually picked up, and I heard the genuine shock in his voice for about 30 seconds before I heard Sandra in the background say something I couldn't quite make out. And Jeff said, "Hey, I gotta go, but I'll call you back. I want to be careful here because I know how this sounds. It sounds like I'm asking for sympathy. And maybe I am a little. But more than that, I want you to understand what I learned about myself during those months, because it's the thing that made me who I was by the time I sat in that restaurant. I learned I could do hard things alone. The surgery was a Tuesday in February. I drove myself to the hospital at 5:30 in the morning. I checked myself in. I held my own hand metaphorically because physically I was unconscious. I woke up in recovery, and the nurse asked if there was anyone she could call. "Just me," I said. She looked at me with this expression I've thought about many times since. Not pity exactly, more like recognition, like she'd seen this before, like just me was a thing people said, and she understood what it cost to say it. The tumor was removed cleanly. Dr. Riaz was cautiously optimistic, which in oncologist language apparently means things went as well as they possibly could. I spent 3 days in the hospital. I watched a lot of bad daytime television. I ordered soup that tasted like warm salt water. I did not receive a single visitor. I sent one more group message to the family. Just an update. Surgery went well. Home soon. Sandra liked the message. The little thumbs up. A thumbs up for my cancer surgery going well. I stared at that, thumbs up, for a long time. I thought about everything it communicated. I thought about the geometry of that tiny digital gesture against the backdrop of everything that had happened. Then I put my phone down and went back to my warm saltwater soup. Recovery took months. The financial hit was significant. Medical leave, reduced income, bills that seemed to multiply every time I opened my mailbox. I burned through savings. I restructured everything. I was careful and methodical and completely exhausted for most of it. But here's the thing about surviving something genuinely terrible alone. It resets your baseline. The things that used to seem scary, conflict, confrontation, the possibility of someone being disappointed in you, they all shrink considerably. By the time I was fully recovered, cleared by Dr. Riaz with a handshake and a genuine smile, something in me had calcified. Not in a bitter way, in a clarified way. I knew exactly who I was. I knew exactly who they were. And I was for the first time in my adult life completely at peace with the distance between us. I didn't know it yet, but peace in my family's hands had an expiration date. It came on a Wednesday afternoon in September. 7 years after Ashley's wedding, I didn't fund, and approximately 4 years since I'd heard Sandra's actual voice. My phone buzzed. Mom, the contact I'd never deleted for reasons I don't fully understand. Nostalgia maybe, or evidence depending on your perspective. I stared at it for 2 full rings. Then I picked up Andrew. Her voice was warm. That particular warmth she deployed for occasions requiring strategy. "How are you, sweetheart?" We were apparently doing sweetheart. "I'm good, Sandra." I'd started calling her Sandra in my head years ago. It slipped out sometimes. She either didn't notice or chose not to address it. "It's been so long. I've been thinking about you." HI had developed a very useful non-committal hum. Your father and I, we'd love to see you. We all would. We thought, what if we all got together for dinner somewhere? Nice to talk, to reconnect. I feel like there's so much unsaid between us, Andrew, and it's just not healthy. I held the phone and watched a pigeon on my windowsill do something deeply stupid with a piece of bread. Just the immediate family, I asked. Of course, just us. Your dad, me, Ashley, Kevin, Jeff. We just want to see you. Something told me to say no. The pigeon told me to say no. The calcified, clarified, recovered version of me had every reason to say no. But there's this thing about the word family that bypasses logic, even when you know better. It's like a software vulnerability in the human brain, a zero-day exploit that never fully gets patched, no matter how many updates you run. Okay, I said. Oh, wonderful. Friday evening, 7 o'clock Maristo's on 5th. I knew that restaurant. I knew it because it had a dress code and a sumier and a waiting list and an average check per head that would make most people's eyes water. That's a pretty expensive place for a casual family dinner, I said. Nothing's too good for a reunion, Sandra said, and I could hear the smile in it. I should have decoded that sentence right then and there. I really should have. Friday, I said. Friday, she confirmed. We love you, Andrew. I hung up, and the pigeon flew away, and I sat there thinking that maybe possibly after 7 years things could be different. I didn't know it yet, but I had just RSVP'd to an ambush. I arrived at 7:02. I know because I checked my watch in the car and thought 2 minutes late was acceptable, relatable, even the kind of lateness that says I'm comfortable but not cavalier. I straightened my jacket. I walked in. The hostess led me toward the private dining area in the back, the kind of space they use for birthdays and corporate events. And apparently, whatever this was, I heard them before I saw them. Laughter, multiple voices, the clink of glassware. And when I turned the corner and the room opened up, I stopped walking. There were 16 people at that table. 16! I stood there and did a count because I genuinely thought I was miscounting. I wasn't. My immediate family, Sandra, Larry, Ashley, Kevin, Jeff, plus Scott, Ashley's husband, plus Sandra's sister, my Aunt Gloria, who I hadn't seen since a Christmas approximately a decade ago, plus Gloria's husband, plus 3 cousins I could barely name, plus what appeared to be Jeff's new girlfriend who I'd never met, plus 2 family friends whose names I remembered vaguely from barbecues in the mid-2000s, plus 1 person I didn't recognize at all who smiled at me with the confidence of someone who absolutely belongs. 16 people in the table. I want to describe the table. There were lobsters, not a lobster. Multiple lobsters, plates of them. There was a Wagyu beef spread that I clocked at the center of the table. The kind of marbled, absurdly expensive Wagyu that restaurants charge you by the ounce. There were side dishes I didn't even get to fully inventory. And there, in the middle of it all, an open bottle of wine sitting in a silver ice bucket that I recognized because I'd once looked it up in the menu online when a date suggested this restaurant, a $500 bottle of Burgundy, which they were pouring with the casualness of people who were not expecting to be the ones paying for it. Sandra spotted me, and her face broke into a wide, glorious smile. Andrew, you made it. Everyone turned. There was a smattering of hells, waves. Ashley gave me a little finger wave. Larry looked up from his plate and nodded. The man was consistent. I'll give him that. Kevin stood and clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Bro, it's been forever," which was technically accurate. I stood at the head of this table and smiled the smile of a man who was doing very complicated math in his head very quickly. Sit. Sit. Sandra gestured to the empty chair that had, I noticed, been strategically placed at the head of the table, the seat of honor, or the seat where you put the person you need something from. I sat. A waiter materialized. A young guy, maybe mid-20s, with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd seen every variety of human dinner theater. "Can I get you something to drink, sir?" "Water's fine," I said. Sandra reached over and patted my hand. "We're so glad you came, sweetheart. Isn't it wonderful, everyone? Isn't it so good to have Andrew here?" There was a chorus of agreement. Family, friends I barely knew nodding enthusiastically. Cousins I couldn't name raising their glasses of my $500 wine in my direction. I want to tell you that I felt nothing, but that's not quite true. What I felt was a very particular kind of grief. Not for what was happening now, but for the version of this I'd allowed myself to imagine on the drive over. The small, foolish hope that Sandra's call meant something real, that just us meant just us, that reconnect meant reconnect. I picked up the menu. I looked at the prices. I put the menu back down, so I said pleasantly, "Quite a gathering." "Well, everyone wanted to see you," Sandra said. "You know how it is. Once word got out that you were coming, people just wanted to be here." "Oh, that's Rick," Sandra said, gesturing to the stranger. "He's Gloria's new partner." "Rick, this is Andrew, our eldest." Rick raised his glass of my wine. "Great to finally meet you, man." "Likewise, Rick." The dinner continued. Food came and went. Conversation swirled around me. Family gossip I'd missed. Updates I hadn't asked for. Elaborate stories about people I'd lost track of. Ashley's house renovation. Kevin's new job. Jeff's girlfriend, whose name was apparently Brittany, who seemed perfectly nice and extremely unaware of what she'd walked into. Nobody mentioned the cancer. Nobody mentioned the 7 years. Nobody mentioned the voicemails or the texts or the surgery I'd driven myself to at 5:30 in the morning. We were just a happy family at dinner. Apparently, I ate my bread roll and waited. It didn't take long. Sandra sat down her fork, dabbed her mouth with the linen napkin, and looked at me with an expression she probably thought read as casual. "So, Andrew," she said, "you're doing well these days? Work's good?" "Work's good. Yeah, she smiled. "That's so wonderful. You've always been the responsible one." She let that land then so smoothly. "You almost missed the gear shift. You know, we should probably start thinking about the check soon." She looked around the table warmly, still smiling. "You're going to cover this, right?" Silence. Not a complete silence. Silverware still clinked somewhere down the table. Rick was laughing at something, but the people close enough to hear it went quiet. Sandra was looking at me with that smile. Ashley was studying her lobster very carefully. Larry found his bread roll deeply interesting. I looked at Sandra. I looked at the table. I looked at the wagyu, the lobsters, the empty second bottle of wine they'd already started on, the 16 people who had materialized from a promised 5. I thought about a Tuesday morning in February, a parking garage, a phone that didn't ring. Then I raised my hand and signaled the waiter. "Of course," I said. Sandra's smile widened. The waiter came over, the same young guy, the one with the practice neutrality. I leaned in slightly, very calm, very quiet. "Can you bring me the bill, please?" I said. "And don't process anything yet. I just want to see it." Sandra was still smiling at the table, back in conversation mode. The matter apparently settled to her satisfaction. Ashley had relaxed. Kevin was telling a story to Jeff about something that happened at work. Rick laughed again. Brittany was being very polite. I sat and breathed. The waiter returned. He placed a leather folder in front of me. I opened it. $6,840. I want to type that out again so it fully registers. $6,840 for a dinner I hadn't been told about for 16 people I hadn't invited to celebrate a reconciliation that had not at any point featured an apology. I closed the folder. I set it on the table in front of me, and I did something I hadn't planned on doing. I hadn't rehearsed this. There was no script. I just started talking. "Can I have everyone's attention for a minute?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Something in my tone reached down the table and pulled people's faces toward me. The chatter died. Rick stopped laughing. Sandra tilted her head, slightly uncertain, but still confident. Still in control, she thought. 7 years ago, I said. I told my family I couldn't pay for Ashley's wedding. $28,000. And I want to be clear. It wasn't that I didn't care. It was that I didn't have it. Not without seriously compromising my own life. And I said, no, because sometimes no is the honest answer. Ashley looked up from her plate. After that, I continued. The calls stopped. The texts stopped. I went from being the oldest son to being nothing, essentially. And I told myself, okay, people need time. Families go through things. I was patient. 18 months after that, I was diagnosed with cancer. I said it simply, no drama, just the words. A malignant tumor here. I touched the left side of my neck. I called Mom. I left a voicemail. I texted Dad. I called Ashley, Kevin, Jeff. Nobody called back. Not when I told them. Not when I had surgery. Not when I was in the hospital for 3 days by myself. Not once. The table was completely silent now. I drove myself to surgery at 5:30 in the morning, I said, because there was nobody to drive me. I woke up in recovery, and a nurse asked if there was anyone she should call, and I said, just me. I'm telling you this not because I want your guilt. I'm past that. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand the context of this dinner. Sandra's smile was completely gone. You called me 6 weeks ago, I said, looking at her directly, and told me you wanted to reconnect. You said it would be just the 5 of you. You said you wanted to talk. I thought, and I know how this reflects on my judgment. I thought maybe this was the thing, the apology, the acknowledgement, something real. I picked up the leather folder and held it up. Instead, I walked into a room with 16 people, Lobster, Wagyu, a $500 bottle of wine, already mostly gone, by the way. Thank you, Rick. And you waited until the end of the meal to inform me with that smile. I looked at Sandra that I'd be paying for it, Andrew. Sandra's voice was tight. This is not the place. No, it really is actually, I said. This is exactly the place. You chose a public restaurant. You chose an audience. So, let's use the audience. I heard something shift in the room, not just our table. The tables around us had gone quiet. I was aware peripherally of faces turning. A couple nearby, a table of business dinner, a server who had slowed her walk to listen. $6,840, I said, holding up the folder. That's what I was invited to pay for tonight. By people who didn't call me when I had cancer. By people who sent me a thumbs up on a text message about my surgery going well. A thumbs up. I looked at Sandra. I still think about that thumbs up, Mom. I think about it a lot. Sandra looked away. Ashley, I said. She met my eyes. I hope you're happy. I hope Scott's uncle's money was enough for the wedding because mine wasn't going to be. And I'm not sorry about that because I was being honest about what I could do. Ashley's jaw tightened. Scott, to his credit, looked at the table. Kevin, Jeff. They both looked at me. Jeff's girlfriend, Brittany, had the expression of someone who had just realized the dinner party she agreed to attend was in a different genre than advertised. You were young. I understand how family pressure works. But you're grown now, both of you. And you watched this happen, and you said nothing. Kevin opened his mouth. Andrew, man, we didn't know. You knew, I said not unkindly. You just decided that was okay. Kevin closed his mouth. I stood up. I survived cancer alone. I rebuilt my finances alone. I built a life that I'm proud of completely without the support of the people who were supposed to be my family. And I did it. I'm standing here healthy and employed and clear-headed. And honestly, I'm fine. I set the folder back on the table. I genuinely am, which is what I need you to hear. I'm not saying this because I'm broken by it. I'm saying this because I'm done. Done, Sandra repeated. Done, I confirmed. I don't have a family. I have 5 people I grew up with and 16 people they decided to invite to dinner. And none of you are my responsibility. Not financially, not emotionally, not anymore. I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out my wallet, and I placed 3 crisp bills on the table. Enough to cover my water and my bread roll, and not 1 cent more. That's my portion, I said. Then I looked at the waiter who had reappeared at some point during the monologue and was standing at a respectful distance with the serene expression of a man who had absolutely been waiting for this moment. Could you split the remaining bill among the other guests, please? Equally. Of course, sir, he said, completely straight-faced, a professional. I picked up my jacket. Andrew, you cannot be serious. Sandra started. You have a wonderful evening, I said. And then the thing happened that I did not expect. It started at the couple's table nearby. The woman started clapping first. 2 slow claps, and her partner joined in immediately. Then the business dinner table picked it up. Then a server started clapping. Then another. Then voices. Good for you, man, from somewhere in the room. A damn right from a table I couldn't see. By the time it had built into a full rolling wave of applause in that restaurant, I was already walking toward the door. I didn't look back. I tell people I didn't look back because I was making a dramatic exit. Honestly, it was because I didn't want them to see that my eyes had gotten wet. Not from sadness. I want to be completely clear about that. Not from sadness at all. Just from the unexpected weight of being seen. This is 2 years later on a Sunday morning in a kitchen that gets good light. There's coffee on the counter. There's a golden retriever asleep on the rug near the window, one of his back legs twitching and whatever dogs chase in their sleep. There's the sound of the shower running down the hall. Her name is Susan. She came into my life about 8 months after Maristos through the kind of ordinary circumstance that makes for boring telling but extraordinary living. She was at a farmer's market, and I was lost looking for parking, and she gave me directions. And then when I found the market, I saw her again buying peaches. And something about that felt like the universe being uncharacteristically direct. She knew about the cancer on our 3rd date. She knew about the family by our 5th. She didn't flinch. She didn't make it weird. She just asked the right questions in the right order with the right amount of silence between them. "Are you okay?" she asked after I'd finished the whole story one night on her balcony. Both of us with glasses of wine, the city spread out below us. "Yeah," I said. "Actually, yeah, you seem okay." "I am," I said. "I think for the first time in a long time, I really am." She nodded. Then she said, "Those lobsters, though, you sat through the whole meal." "I ate a bread roll," she laughed. She has a laugh that takes up room. I mean, that is the best possible compliment. Sandra has called twice since the dinner. I didn't pick up. I didn't feel bad about it. I felt exactly nothing, which is the thing you're reaching for when you talk about peace. Not happiness. Exactly. Not the absence of anything. Just nothing where there used to be static. Larry texted once, "Hope you're doing okay, son." 7 words. More than a thumbs up. I'll grant him that. I texted back, "I'm doing great, actually, because I am." Ashley sent an email that started with, "I don't know if you want to hear from me," and then went on for 4 paragraphs about her feelings with one sentence near the end that was in the general vicinity of an apology. I read it twice. I drafted 3 responses and deleted all of them. I haven't replied. I don't know if I will. I'm not angry at Ashley. I'm just not sure what the point would be. Kevin called out of the blue about 6 months ago. He sounded different, sheepish, and a little older. He said, "I should have called you when you were sick. I know that." "I should have just called." I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm sorry." I sat with that for a minute. Then I said, "I hear you." We talked for 20 minutes. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't a scene. It was just 2 people older than they used to be being honest for the first time in a long time. I don't know what Kevin and I are now. Something small and careful and maybe real. Jeff I haven't heard from. Brittany seems nice from her Instagram, which I am not ashamed to admit. I checked once. The shower's turned off now. Susan's moving around in the next room. The dog's awake and looking at me with that expression. That means you have 3 minutes before I make your morning about my breakfast needs. "Hey," Susan says, appearing in the kitchen doorway in a sweater that's technically mine. Her hair is damp. She's looking at her phone. "Your brother Kevin texted my phone somehow? Is that weird? He must have gotten your number from someone." "What does he want?" She reads. He says, and I quote, "Tell Andrew his money is still good at Mary Stowe's if he ever wants to go back." She looks at me. We both start laughing at the same time. The real kind, the uncontrolled kind, the kind that fills a kitchen on a Sunday morning with good light and makes the dog's ears prick up and makes everything briefly entirely fine. I pour my coffee. I look around the kitchen at Susan, at the dog, at the ordinary beautiful Sunday of my life, and I think about Sandra's smile and the Wagyu and $6,840 and a nurse asking if there was anyone she should call and a pigeon doing something stupid with a piece of bread and a thumbs-up reaction on a text message about cancer surgery. And I think every single dollar of it was worth it. Not the bill, the exit. Some people will charge you for a meal they ordered and call it family. The trick is knowing when to leave the table.